Shit We've Read is a proud member of Bilo Network, a network of geeky podcasts.
Please visit shitwe'veread.com to support the show.
Now, let's talk about some books.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Shit We've Read, a sci-fi fantasy book podcast hosted by some geeky friends. I am Laura Benson, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Jason Rico.
Hello, that's me. How's it going? Bye.
Okay.
Also here with Bella Romero. Hello.
Hey, you guys.
And we're excited to have Sarah Marie Hawkins back with us. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you back on with us. We had a lot of fun when you were with us for episode 8, Gear Breakers.
Yeah,
It was a good conversation.
glad to be back.
Yeah. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. I think this has been on our list for a little while, and it just came out, so we made sure to schedule it. So we're excited to talk about that tonight. But first, I want to know, what is the other shit that we're reading? Sarah Marie, would you like to share?
What else am I reading? I'm reading. I can't remember the title of it, but it's the. Let me look. Sorry. I am currently reading Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. It's kind of the prequel to everything.
It's what the new show is based off. The House of Dragon, right? Mm-hmm. I might be reading that next because I was like, I love a good source material.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is that a standalone or is that a series?
It's a standalone.
Okay. All right. So it's finished. All right. Good job.
Let's see how well they do.
Yeah, that's the next thing.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I might be reading that. I mean, so far I like the show, but I do like to compare notes, especially with Game of Thrones.
Well, what about you, Bella?
What am I reading? A very different tone, a very different genre. As our listeners have already heard, probably in the last 2 podcasts I've recorded, that I'm still very deep into historical romance right now. But I just started A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall, which is really fun. And the Duchess, I forgot what the series is called now. But it's Tessa Dare's like Duchess series. But it's called something specifically, and now I'm just totally blanking on it. Maybe Girl Meets Duke, I think, is the series. But yeah, so just a lot of historical romance. It's just the easiest thing to like fall asleep to. I know the tropes by now. I know the formulas, how it's going to go. So it's just been really fun. I have so many on my loans shelf. I won't even read them for you guys. They're all some variation of like a lady, a duke, a duchess, like insert into title here. So
Cool. Jason?
Yeah, you mentioned how the book we're discussing today just came out earlier this month. Well, what else came out earlier this month is the Sandman TV show on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have been making my way through the Sandman universe comics.
The Sandman.
So I started with the first volumes that the TV show is based off of. And then I jumped forward. I've already read all the old comic books. I don't have to read all of them again. What I did is I jumped forward to the newer Sandman universe, which is an imprint from DC Comics that was launched in 2019. They launched 4 new titles, and then I think some other ones have joined since then. But I never really read the new stuff. I read that first one-shot that was released that teased the 4 different directions they were going.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been slowly making my way through Books of Magic, The Dreaming, House of Whispers, and I'm blanking on the 4th. Oops, sorry. Whoever is writing that book. Sure. But yeah, so I've been making my way through that, and should be finishing that up in probably the next couple days. Yeah.
Nice. It's been so long since I read the original Sandman comics that I didn't remember a whole lot. So I liked watching the show because I felt like I could still judge it separate from the source material. But it was good. That's a good show. I'm planning
It's
to go
really
back
good.
and read them too. So
Yeah, anybody listening, if you haven't watched that show, it's super good. You don't have to be familiar with comic books whatsoever. My mom and my sister watched it, and I got a text from my mom maybe about a week ago. She's like, "Do you recommend the Sandman books?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're really good." I was like,
yeah.
"You do know it's a comic book, though, right? That they're not based on novels." She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Then yeah, if you want to borrow them, go for it." And so
Aw.
she's gonna read them.
Aw.
I'm kind of excited about that. But
That's
Does your mom
cool.
usually read comics?
no, that's why I made sure to clarify. Is like you
Yeah.
do know these are comic books, not books.
Aw.
There's pictures in these, right? Like, but yeah,
Not a lot of
just they-
words. Yeah.
yeah. I guess they like them enough to read it. So I'm pretty excited.
That's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that for you. You get to bond with your mom over a comic
I
book
know.
series.
That's
I
cute.
know.
Little baby Rico, I'm sure, is very happy. The younger Rico is like, "Oh, mom, we get to talk about
Yeah.
comics."
Where was this 15 years ago?
Oh, boy.
No, I'm kidding.
Now
I'm
you-
kidding.
Now you went
I'm kidding.
sad and depressing. Jeez. Just
No, I'm
make
kidding.
it a
I'm
moment.
kidding. No, luckily I had really supportive parents who are like reading is reading.
That's good.
What about you, Laura?
Well, I have been kind of reading two things simultaneously, which I've not done in years. I just finished reading A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I did not really know what I was going to be reading when I opened it. I couldn't remember what the synopsis said. I just know that it had to do with a monk and a robot, which it is
That
a
sounds
series
like a really
called
bad joke.
it is actually a series called Monk and Robot.
Okay.
But Becky Chambers is an amazing author, and so I was just like, I'm just gonna read it anyways. And like, this book made me cry in a good way. By the end, I was like, I literally just tears everywhere, because it was the message that I needed. And so I recommend it to everyone. It's also a novella, so it's a really quick read. And I'm excited to read the second one. I don't know if there's going to be more or not, but and then I also hopped on the audiobooks and started the Firebird series by Claudia Gray. So I listened to 1,000 Pieces of You and 10,000 Skies Above You, which is like a multiverse hopping kind of story, which is really really interesting. I really like the concept behind the multiverse, and it's also kind of, I guess, a romance at the same time. It's kind of weird sometimes, but yeah, if you like romance but you also like sci-fi multiverse stuff, probably like this one. There's a third one that I'll probably get to soon also, but I'm big on the multiverse stuff too, so I have been enjoying that overall.
Claudia Gray has written, I think, 3 of my favorite Star Wars novels.
Really?
That's my experience with Claudia Gray. So yeah, that series is on my list too.
Yeah, I finally got to it because I was like, I need to get to more books. I want more stories, and so tried out the audiobook so I could play it in the background while I'm doing stuff. So yeah.
Speaking of Audible, and then earlier Sandman, another plug. If you haven't listened to the Sandman Audible adaptations, those are also very, very good. Just
I've been wondering how they adapted a graphic novel to audio.
Oh, they're really good. It's so I read the comics and then I listened to the Audible adaptations and then I watched the show, so I was able to compare all 3.
Oh,
yeah, but they're good. They're not as in depth as a comic or even the show because it is just audio. They read very much like old timey like radio dramas kind of thing. It's very kind of quick and just a lot of dialogue, and then narrator comes in. It's like, and then Morpheus turns to blah, 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 But I still think they're really good. Full cast, full production, sound effects, great voice cast. So just another plug for Sandman.
The Sandman.
Okay, let's get to the book, the featured book of this episode. Again, it's The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. I believe this is her debut novel as well. She said it's a contemporary fantasy or a speculative fiction book. Let's see. Bella, would you like to read the synopsis for us from Goodreads?
Happy to. Okay. Out on the Yorkshire moors lives a secret line of people for whom books are food and who retain all of a book's content after eating it. To them, spy novels are a peppery snack, romance novels are sweet and delicious, eating a map can help them remember destinations, and children, when they misbehave, are forced to eat dry, musty pages from dictionaries. Devon is part of The Family, an old and reclusive clan of book eaters. Her brothers grew up feasting on stories of valor and adventure, and Devon, like all other book eater women, is raised on a carefully curated diet of fairy tales and cautionary stories. But real life doesn't always come with happy endings, as Devon learns when her son is born with a rare and darker kind of hunger, not for books, but for human minds.
I just want to jump in and say that last bit about her son being born with a rare and darker kind of hunger, did not remember that part whatsoever going into the book. So I was a little surprised.
I can see where you were shocked, because it starts off pretty hardcore on that dark hunger.
Yeah.
So I think before we get into that, maybe let's start with some content. I think this is an appropriate time to warn our readers. From the author, these were the content warnings that we were provided: body horror, gore, explicit violence, domestic abuse, and violence against children. But we, after talking a little bit, added cannibalism, specifically eating brains, and sexual assault. We did feel like that needed to be explicitly warned of. There is a lot of blurred lines sort of discussions in this book. So,
yeah. Well, I guess let's just jump into non-spoiler impressions then of this book, keeping in mind also those content warnings. What did you guys think of it? Who wants to go first?
Well, okay, so I already said I forgot that last line. I mean, when I first added this book to my Goodreads list, months ago, the thing that I remembered was book eaters, people who eat books. And I'm sold. But that was months ago. So this book was not at all what I was expecting. Again, most of that is probably due to my own expectations rather than anything the book was promised. But I thought this book in general was really dense and perhaps one of the strangest books I've ever read, in a good way. It is all at once, a really very real story about motherhood and traditional gender roles and patriarchal systems and bodily autonomy and personal freedom, queer identity, and love. But also it's a fantasy about these almost vampire-like creatures, but also horror and kind of a spy thriller mixed into. So it's just a lot all thrown into the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like every other chapter I was like, wait, this is a different flavor I'm getting. Wait, where is this going? What's happening? And so a lot of times I was just kind of lost, enjoying it, but lost. And it wasn't really until about 70% of the way into the book that I was like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what the story finally is. Now I know where we're going. And so now I'm into it. But until that point, I was just like, I'm just happy to be here.
I think that's a great way of describing the book. Yeah, I feel like depending on the chapter that you were reading, because it's told from different timelines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at times you're in the present day, and at times you're 12 years in the past, 20 years, 5, 3, 2, 1, 6 months. I think depending on where you are in Devon's story, you do get a very different book, which I think was what made it hard at times to follow it. Was there were some chapters I was really involved in and some that were a little bit more not, I don't want to say mundane because it's not the right word, but more practical. We need to talk about this to get to the next chapter, where there's going to be something bigger happening, a little bit more about her normal life, the present day, what's happening. And you're yeah, get back to that other part with the brains, what's happening. So yeah, you get kind of broken up into pieces. I also kind of thought of Gothic fiction when I was reading this book, just based on the setting where you are, very dark and dreary, and sort of that supernatural, like unreliable narrator feeling. Like when Devon's in the other houses and they're not telling her things. It felt more like sci-fi gothic, if that's even a category that I can describe, because you have a sense of like time and place are very blended. Especially, as the book progresses, we learn a lot about Devon's past. And in those moments where we dive into her past, I'm trying not to give too many spoilers away, but it just kind of got into that sort of like genre bending, like of flavors of horror, with a sci-fi angle on it. So I really liked that part of it. I really liked the parts where we were in the manors, which is where these families reside, for those of you listening who have not read the book. So you spend a lot of time in these like various different English manors, which I'm always a big fan of. Historical fiction is set there. So I was very on board for those chapters. But yeah.
I'm really glad you said gothic, because that was something I was going to bring up later. This book,
Yeah.
heavy gothic vibes for me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's really it's so interesting because they're book eaters, that there were all these different genre elements. I think that felt pretty organic to the plot too.
What about you, Sarah Marie?
Well, for me, when Rico first came to me about like what book do we want, what month do we want you to come on, and what do you want to read? Here are kind of the books that we have. I didn't read anything about it. I didn't look at the synopsis. I was like, I'm gonna go in blind. That's fun, right? I even book eaters, just the thought of that, I did not realize it was literal. So when I bought the book, like I pre-ordered it came, I was like, great, awesome, I'm gonna set aside some time tonight to read it. I was a little floored because again, I just hadn't read the synopsis at all, didn't know what I was getting into, but was pleasantly surprised. I do agree with Bella. There, like we said before, this is on multiple timelines, but the parts of Devon's past, I guess, well, I don't want to give too much away, but there is a very distinct mood change between the two, especially when she's younger. And I'm like, how did you get here? What, I want to know the in between, but I want to know the back. How did you, you were here and now you're here? And I was more interested in the backstory of Devon and her childhood. There were a lot of things about it that, because they were isolated in these manors, that I wasn't quite sure what year this was set in at first. Until a little later on, there were some things said, and I was like, oh, this is fairly modern. I did really like that. And I think there are some parallels to growing up in a very conservative, a very sheltered environment that hit me because that's how I grew up. So that was kind of what I wanted to. I enjoyed all of the chapters, but I think I rushed a little bit to get back to those other parts. I don't know if anyone else did that. And then I wasn't getting everything, so I kind of had to re-listen to things or reread them. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a very ambitious first novel.
Yeah.
Like I was like, where did this world come from? This was your first novel? I started looking her up because that was the other thing. I did not look up the author prior to reading the book. I didn't want to look up anything. I wanted to be surprised. And so I was really shocked that this was her first one, because she created a whole world and a whole like lore that I partway through the book was like, are book eaters in lore? I'm gonna look it up, and they're not. She created a whole nother like fantasy creature that I was convinced while reading the book that this was based on something else, and it wasn't. So hats off to her for that.
Yeah, it was she did a really good job in general of balancing a lot of the deeper, more serious topics also. Yeah. I pretty much agree with all of you guys. I think that I had a little bit of a different experience trying to get through it though, because I was having some rough weeks while I was trying to read it. So then I tried to do the audiobook, but the audiobook was not holding my attention very well. And so then I kept missing things. So then I just had to go back and read it. So then I just felt like it was taking forever for me to finish this book. I love the lore of it. I think that the more serious things in it were done well, as I mentioned. But at the same time, I don't know that I was in the right mindset to read this book, because it is very much about women's experience, women's trauma, and there's things in it that just kind of made me uncomfortable, which, you know, I think it was good because it explains certain situations and how women feel, and like, you know, tries to help the reader understand what Devon is going through as a woman. And so I thought that was really great, but I was just not personally in the mindset to sit there and read that kind of thing. So I wonder if maybe, like, I enjoyed it, but I wonder if I would have enjoyed it more if I had read it at a different time.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, Jason, you said it's a very dense book. And that is a very good word for it, but it specifically applies to certain aspects of it. But I will also say, Sarah Marie, I was also kind of getting the religious kind of vibe. You brought that up, right? Yeah. But overall, I would say that I enjoyed it. I think she did a really great job. The author did a great job, especially for being a debut novel. Do we want to jump into spoilers then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Spoiler warning. If you have not read this book and you don't want to hear what happens, come back later. Or just keep listening. It's up to you. Okay. So spoilers. I just want to say that when I was reading this, first of all, I also didn't read the synopsis, other than I knew that they ate books. So I didn't really know what to expect, but I thought it was a fantasy. She calls it a fantasy, but reading it, I was like, is this really a fantasy or is this sci-fi? Because they're from an alien created them, like way back in history. And I was like, does that make them science fiction then?
Wait, what the fuck? Did I miss that?
Did
You definitely did, Rico.
What are you reading the wrong book?
No. Okay, so you mentioned earlier you're listening to the audiobook, but the audiobook was hard to get into. I started off with the audiobook, and it was difficult. And there were plenty of times where I just like, what the fuck did I listen to? So it must have been during one of them.
Yeah, it's when they talk about the creator.
Yes, I actually put that in my notes.
Holy
Jason,
shit, I
this
missed
is
a
for
whole
you.
section of the book.
It says, the book eaters themselves tell wildly unbelievable legends of the collector, an extraterrestrial being who created them to look humanoid and who placed them on Earth for the purpose of gathering knowledge, book eating, and sampling human experiences, mind eating. And then they mention that throughout the book.
Wow, I should really read this book.
That, you know, this was that it was almost lore to them too. Like maybe they had been
true,
because there was no more communication about that. That was just what they were told they were created as, because it was passed down from multiple generations. So there's a little bit of like going back to religion, a disbelief in multiple generation or the next generation, because it's just what my parents told me to believe.
Good point. Jason, do you remember the mention of the collector?
I don't remember. No, I don't remember that at all.
No. He's like, man, I should reread the book.
I was not a fan of the narrator. I'm sorry, like whoever.
I wasn't either.
If anybody wants to listen to audiobook, I would say avoid it. Also, I was not a fan.
I got that warning just in time from you guys.
There was a part where I'm pretty sure I was dozing off slightly, and I came to, and I didn't really know like how long maybe I'd slept or not, but like what was going on, like I wasn't lost at. I was like, oh, maybe I didn't miss anything. But I must have just missed the chunk about the lore and then jump back into like the storyline. So I'll go back and read that. That sounds fun.
I mean, I think that would be one of my comments about the book was that the lore was often kind of like it felt like an afterthought. Like it was
Yeah.
slipped in to things rather than given its own exposition, whether
Mhm.
that's a chapter or like more of an in-depth conversation between characters. It just felt like, oh yeah, there was this creator. Like you missed it, Rico. Like that's
Yeah.
how, and I think Laura read the whole excerpt here on the podcast. Like there really wasn't much beyond that.
No.
And even like the mentions of different book eaters around the world, those would be mentioned like in passing as a fleeting thought, like, oh, there are some in Japan, but we don't know anything about them. And I was like, wait, they're in Japan? Like, we have different nationalities potentially.
Mhm.
And like, wait, how do you even know that if communication's limited? Like, if travel's difficult? But like, I know a lot of that again is like we only know this because at some point we were able to travel and now we can't. But then, Sarah Marie, you bring up the religion aspect of it, and this is where I felt some inclination of like manipulation and control, which I didn't even like attach
Absolutely.
to cults. Like I don't know if you've said that yet, but I mentioned it in our like pre-recording of like, oh, maybe they're just isolating them to control them. Whoever these families are controlling the people within this group, this collection of the UK or specifically English book eaters.
Mhm.
And like maybe it is possible to go to Japan and they just haven't like let people do that. Maybe only select individuals. Like I don't feel like we could have gone deeper on this.
Yeah. I
Um
think especially
yeah.
with the religious connotation, I I think I was kind of like hoping that like because it was such a fleeting thought, I felt like there could have been something a little bit more to go in, like some sort of worship towards those creators, or oh, these are the set of rules from the creators that we were given, which could have aligned a little more with why they were isolated. Like, oh well, we
Yeah.
are only supposed to absorb the content by eating the books. We don't marry into that or into humans, we don't breed with humans, we don't do all these things because of XYZ creator said so. And that wasn't in there, because I think that that plays along very well with like deep religious cultish Christianity.
Yeah. I felt like there was something bigger at play.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the whole point was Devin is our narrator and as a woman is sheltered from what's going on in the
Yeah.
families. Like she is purposely not told anything of what happens, is continuously lied to and manipulated and given a false sense of control at
Mm-hmm.
times, like with her children, in her marriages. And I was like, oh, there's gonna be somehow we're going to learn more, right? But I couldn't tell if we weren't learning because Devin was a woman or because the author didn't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like, I wasn't sure if it was like, it's too much to talk about it, so I'm not going to talk about it, or I'm intentionally doing this because Devin is a woman. It's hard to tell because at times when she could have talked to a man like Ramsey or Jaro, uh, they didn't offer that information to her either. They
No.
didn't have that. So I think that was a big thing for me was I felt like we could have gone a lot deeper in the book on some of this lore and the greater society of book eaters, which I actually thought of you, Rico, the entire time because I was like, this is Rico's favorite thing. This is one of my favorite things in a book is like
Hmm.
exploring the world and really
Yeah.
understanding how the society functions.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really get that out of this book. And I know
Hmm.
again that our protagonist or narrator was a woman and intentionally she was kept in the dark to control her. But at some point she started, becoming free and learning more and she still didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I don't know. And if this is a standalone book, it was just disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That there was so much more I wanted from the book eaters as a species in that world that I was honestly kind of disappointed when we were introduced to the mind eater because I was like, well, I'm not done with the book eater. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me about them yet. There's still so much more I want to know about the book eater and their way of life and what is it like for them to eat this type of book versus this type of book. And they touched upon it later where where Jaro or maybe Kai, someone was eating a graphic novel. And then it's like, oh, okay. So, I like the fact that the author is saying that graphic novels are literature, so they're still food for them. That's great. But that brought
Yeah.
up some many more questions of like, okay, so they're consuming graphic novels, but book eaters can't write. But comic
Or
books, in a
draw.
lot of ways, are well, they didn't say that at the time.
Oh,
They
okay.
hadn't mentioned it yet. They just said that they couldn't write, and so it's like, okay, well then that doesn't mean they could draw a comic book as long as there is no words in it.
Yes, the
But then later
pacing of the
on,
exposition was interesting.
yes,
I agree.
the author
Yes,
just gave you
that it
little
was.
nuggets of information that didn't come
Mhm.
together until the end. So I had all these questions throughout the book that were later answered. Like my notes are all questions that were answered later,
Later,
which is
yeah.
good. You answered them.
I agree. The order and the pacing of the
Yeah.
exposition was kind of funky, which I think I
Mhm.
said something like when Laura was like, this audiobook's really hard, was like, I can see how the audiobook was really hard because there were times where I had to go back and read something again. Like you said, Rico, there were questions where I was like, wait, so they can't write. Can they draw? Can they type on a phone? And then like you find out, okay, they can't type on a phone because that's technically writing. Like I would have thought it was like, pencil to paper, like, because when were they created was by context was a long time ago when there were no phones, so it was just a lot of questions about that where I was trying to figure it out, like, wait, how do they exist in this society without being able to write at all, like on computers? And then you find out later that they actually have humans in their employment, some of the families, not all of them necessarily. But like, again, we didn't explore that enough either. Like, wait, who decides what humans? And again, I know it's because Devin was our narrator and we're learning from her perspective. So all of this is happening alongside her, but it just felt like the order and the depth at which we went into it was lacking, which was frustrating at
Mhm.
times.
Mhm.
I was wondering how they make phone calls.
How do they how do they type the numbers?
I mean, she had
If
Kai.
that's writing.
Kai can, because Kai is a mind eater. So mind
Yeah.
eaters can.
He texted, but she called.
Yeah, how did she
Like
dial
she
numbers?
can you can save a number, but I was just like, who put the number in?
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I know she was like, oh, I'd go to my previous calls and hit call, but but Jaro was still calling her, and Jaro's not a mind eater, so how was he dialing her phone number?
Like when you meet somebody, put your number in my phone. You just give them the phone, let them do the work.
Right,
But
like
they're only
she
calling each other.
Yeah, well, and she mailed him her. She got the guy to write her phone number on a slip of paper in Morse code to Jaro. But how did Jaro put it in his phone?
I'd have thought about the Morse code. That led me down a train of thought about typing and texting in general. So they could learn Morse code, which is not writing; it's just rhythms,
Tapping.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tapping. You just memorized three dots means this, dot long means this. Okay, fair enough. Remember back in the day before we had touchscreens, when like the old Nokia phones had actual keypad.
And you had to press them.
I was a
number of times?
whiz at texting without
me
ever
too.
looking at the keys because
Yep.
you just 333 like here, 2 dots here, like he knew where the letters were in the keypads. So why couldn't they do the same? It's not technically writing, it's just a rhythm thing. It's this 3 dots here, wait, a dot here, wait. Like you could text as long as you had an old enough phone. These are the kind of questions I have when I read stuff like this.
No, and
That's a
I
good
think
point.
that's where I was confused. Like I understood how they could talk over a phone, but it was like, wait, how can you type numbers into the phone if you can't type a text message? Those are both typing into a phone.
They can type. It's very limited.
Guys, we're such geeks.
I know.
I don't know. I think and I know that it's silly to not suspend disbelief for this small detail, but at times it would have made things more convenient. Like if she could have written her text, then she wouldn't have needed Kai to write the text, which like later on becomes a problem because he's like, hey, you're getting text messages. Who are you texting? Like we've only been texting the Raven Scar whatever family about drugs. So who are these people? Like we're here with the family. So it's like, okay, I don't know.
Look, we like to poke holes and stuff and think about stuff. But honestly, I thought the author did a really good job at answering a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Yes.
I had so many questions in my notes that were touched upon later on. I'm like, okay, good job. And that's not usually the case when I read a lot of these books. Like when I had questions about, well, can they draw? She addresses that they can't draw because it's still a form of creativity. Like, so she did touch upon a lot of these things. So she did do a lot of world building and lore building, and Sarah Marie, to your point, like she did create a really cool creature that I really, really dig, and I'm 100% going to steal it for a D&D campaign. I've already decided. I'm going to turn this into a new race.
So I don't know if you read the author's biography, but she's
I know
very
she rolls
into,
D20s. I know.
Yeah.
I know. I might
So,
hit her up. It's like, so can you help me turn this into a race if you haven't already?
yeah, ask for notes. That would be.
There's already a
super cool.
name, Liberal-Varian. I dug it.
Yeah. I really liked the attention to detail that she put into this race of people. We learn about their biology is different, which was a big question I had. Was like, well, if they're humanoid, then like why can't they just use a lot of the human information about fertility, right? It's like, oh, because our biology is different, we're going to try to adapt it, but like that still requires writing. And I was like, oh, this makes sense why it's taking longer. Like it all made sense. There were like very few things that I had to really like nitpick, like the phone numbers. Like that was really just more like, wait, I'm still confused about this. Can we talk about it? But no, she gave us a lot of context for some of the other things, like you said, that came up in question. Like, wait, why can't they just do IVF if they're humanoid? Like, why is this a problem? Why do they not have enough women? Oh, it's because, they're not really humans, I guess, which gets into the cannibalism thing too, if we want to jump into that, whether it is cannibalism or not.
Are they technically the same species? Are they slight?
No, well, they are because they're born from one another.
They are.
Rico.
Yeah, exactly.
Rico, no. Rico. Fight you on that.
That's their parentage, so they did come from them. Now, is it cannibalism when he eats a human's brain? I don't think so.
I agree.
Still frowned upon, though.
I know. I was like, I don't care about technicalities on that one. They look like humans. They're eating something that looks like them. I'm not a fan of that. But sure, on a technical level, yeah. But I still
vampires look like humans.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
Yeah, but that's not cannibalism. So that cannibalism. Vampires.
No, that's not cannibalism. But I still don't like
that's
it.
No. The only time,
although that's true, they were descended from humans. They were just infected with a virus.
Yeah.
So this is true.
The only time the cannibalism was ever creepy to me was when it was Kai, and that's because just kids are creepy, like in horror movies.
Yes.
Like
yes.
The visual of little Kai just like wrapping himself around someone's head and just sticking his proboscis in someone's ear. I was like, oh,
yes. This is the gothic part.
Oh, that's scary. I don't care if an adult does it, but the fact that a kid was doing it, I'm like, oh no, no, thank you.
No, this is the gothic part that was like, this is where I felt like he was more of a incubus, right? Is that the male? Okay, an incubus of sorts. And so this is where I was like, that supernatural yet sci-fi feeling, because he's technically an alien, I guess, but like this is where it felt like, I don't know, other
yeah,
like this
also
unnatural need.
One of the themes throughout about Kai is that he's losing more and more of himself because of who he's being. So not only is he a child that eats brains with a gigantic long tongue thingy, he's a child that has like the old soul, but very, 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 very creepy because it's several of these older people. And right after eating them, he exhibits a lot of their traits, like talking about how he wants to, I wish I could go drink a beer. I wish I could, like the things that the people he used to do. And I'm imagining in my head this 5-year-old, it makes the creepy child even more creepy. Because he's so stoic too.
Yes, it makes him so much more creepy because he is himself and somebody else and 25 other people all at the same time. It's like she's like, I don't know who I'm talking to. Ugh. It just was like I just
Mhm.
wouldn't feel comfortable. Like you just
Well,
would be like, who am I with right now? Because like there's something violating about not knowing like your son, you're fine telling certain things to, but like you don't want a stranger to know about like your love life or your secret plans. And it feels weird that he could be somebody else.
yeah, and
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
if you remember, their relationship was not really parent
Mm-mm.
child. He didn't
No.
even call her mom.
No,
Like,
Devin.
I
He
don't think
called her Devin.
he ever called her that. So I often got caught up on the fact that it never felt like parent child. Maybe
Not
it
in a
was
natural way. Not in a
sibling,
natural
younger
way.
sibling, but
Yeah.
never felt like parent child ever. Not at all. I would forget sometimes.
Well, it was like the juxtaposition of her with Kai versus Salem. Like with Salem, she's like she giggles, she laughs, like I
Mhm.
take care of her, I hold her, I sing to her, I feed her fairy tales. Versus Kai, like she was like I, stood away from him, like tried to gave him redemption and hoped that he stopped being hungry for brains. Like it was a very different way of looking at him. Like
Mhm.
he was a
Mhm.
problem that needed fixing, whereas Salem was somebody she had to protect and keep safe from
Not even
other people.
a problem, but like could be dangerous to her.
Dangerous to her, yeah, to herself. Like she was like, he could eat me. Whereas Salem, it was like other people want her for themselves. Like they want my daughter to be like a bride, and like I just want to be her mom. Whereas
Mhm.
Kai, it was like, no, I don't want them to steal my son and murder him, but I'm also like, am I a terrible mom for maybe not wanting him to be alive right now? I
Yeah.
don't know. Like I agree with you. It was like she never really felt motherly towards him other than like it felt like obligatory, like she was
Mhm.
supposed to because she gave birth to him, she had to protect him and keep him alive, not because she really wanted to, because
Mhm.
she loved him. Like she never said that to him.
No.
Yeah. It's just creepy. I
Well,
didn't like when Kai talked.
she kind of had that mindset even when she was like prior to becoming pregnant with him. The mindset was always, I'm going to do what I have to do and then I'm going to go get my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So even in that whole it wasn't at all like when she was pregnant with her daughter, um that kind of like joyous expectancy. She was just
Mm-hmm.
like, I just need to get my stuff done. And I think that that's when she starts to realize with like her cousin, like, oh, that's why she's like that. That's why we're using substance to manage,
Mm-hmm.
with the drinking, and she ends up doing that quite a bit when they're on their own.
A question I had that I don't feel like was answered, but maybe you guys felt there was an answer to this. But how did a mind eater happen from a book eater? Like, what were the conditions that led someone to have a mind eater versus a book eater? Like, I don't feel like that was ever addressed.
I don't think it was. I think it was like, well, if this happens, it's that
Let's
sucks.
kill them.
We can only have so
Or
many children, and yeah, let's kill them, or they'll be
turned
the
into dragons.
yeah.
Yeah, I felt like that was a little bit like, could we talk about that a little bit? Could we explore that? How do they happen?
Because if you did know how that happened, would they not? I mean, obviously it's a bad thing, but if your creator who created you and you're supposed to think of this thing or this
Mm,
being as the answer to everything, and when your parents tell, well, this is what we were here to do, and that's the only answer you get, why was
yeah.
there not more answered about, like, when did they suddenly decide we're going to start killing all of them
Right.
in
Like who decided that they were bad or should be punished or put down?
yeah.
Because they even when Devin in the part that Laura read earlier, like they said that they were meant to sample human experience, right? Because like books just give you knowledge, but mind eaters actually, and I think that Hester mentions this as well, like reading a book on guns on like the mechanisms of guns and like how to shoot a firearm, give you like the instructions, right? It's like reading an instruction manual. Like in theory, I now could do this, but the actual like muscle memory, practice, feeling, sight, sound, the desensitization comes from eating a mind.
Yeah.
And that does seem important.
Mm-hmm.
Like in this society where they can't interact with humans and where they might need to at some point. Because like they talk about how Devin is really awkward in society. Like she's leaving at 2 a.m. to like walk her baby in a
Mm-hmm.
busy city. And her brother's like, what the hell are you doing? You don't look like a normal human woman,
With
let
no
alone, yeah, like with no shoes on. You're 6 feet tall. You're like this monstrosity of strength. Like, go, leave town. Like people are getting suspicious. She's like, huh? What do you mean? Like, I'm just living my life. Like I've actually really toned it down. He's like, no, you have not. And this is where I'm like, maybe being a mind eater would have actually been a good thing because she could have ate the mind of a mother and known how to act in that society. So I feel like, and maybe this was the author's point, was that by vilifying the mind eaters, they've set themselves back as a species in terms of integration with humans, because they could have had that.
Well, maybe
if they
that
had just
is
tried. I don't know.
Maybe that is the point, because
Yeah.
so much of this is about sheltering and about manipulation and not giving the right information to the children, to the society. And maybe mind eaters started to think for themselves or through others, you know, you eat the wrong
Yeah.
mind and suddenly
Yes.
think very differently.
And this is where I'm like, I wish we had explored this a little bit more,
Mhm.
because I think that could have been a really interesting book all on its own. And like they mentioned that the Japanese make Redemption, but like they know nothing about how it's used or what they do with mind eaters over there.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I could totally see how maybe in that culture they take like, maybe they have like humans that work for them too, and maybe mind eaters eat like an elderly human at a certain point, like maybe once they're at a developmental stage and then a human is old enough, they eat that mind and like gain that experience of the human, and that's like another way to continue on their like existence in that society.
Mhm.
And I just was like, I was exploring this. I was like, this is really interesting and really cool. I want this in the book. Tell me if I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's levels to what the mind eater represents when you look at it through the lens of humanity. Sarah Marie, to your point, I think the literal idea of absorbing someone's thoughts and thinking for yourself definitely is part of it. My understanding of it was that the mind eater represents to humans anybody that's different, anybody that's born different, and how they're looked down upon by the rest of humanity, right? Whether you're born queer, whether you're born autistic, whether you're born with a disability, what have you, you are different, and you're always going to be looked at as different. But one of my favorite parts in the book was later on when Kai was talking to Devin, and he was saying, "You are a worse monster than I am. Everybody's always going to look at me and see a monster, but you are a worse monster." And Bella, you and I touched upon this on the last episode with daughter Dr. Moreau about humans are fully capable of being monstrosities all on their own. They don't need any any outside like reasoning. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what the book, for me at least, was saying. That it's like, yes, this is a child who looks different, who will always be different, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You
Who's the
you
real
human,
monster?
the ones who are judging him, you're the real monster. The ones who are justifying your villainous ways, you are the monster.
Mhm.
Well, and to that point, there's a moment where Devin is visiting Camelot, the fortress for the knights and the dragons, and she finds that that the dragons basically live in sensory deprivation rooms, like all
Mhm.
white, paneled rooms. They wear white, and they're going crazy. Like these individuals are being driven to obedience. And Devin's like, "Oh, those poor people, like those poor beings." And her brother's like, "They're just dragons. Like, why are you feeling bad for them?" And I was like, I would say that he's the worst monster, right? Because he's abusing these people. Even though Devin has is going to commit more murders for her son. Like, it's pretty shitty that they do this to their own people. So,
Yeah. And he was one of them, you know.
mm-hmm.
He was taken as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The disassociation from like the whole process is crazy.
If you'll allow me, I want to switch gears really quickly and talk
Yeah.
about the inclusion of video games in the book. Because honestly, I think
You'll
Sarah
allow me.
Marie,
So polite.
yeah, Sarah Marie, I think earlier you were saying how like you didn't really know what time or like what
No.
era this sort of took place until something happened, and that it was that for me. And maybe it's the same for you, but I honestly thought I was reading a gothic novel
Yeah.
set around the gothic era until there was video games. I'm like, whoa, but this is now. Okay, cool, I dig it. And I thought that was such a cool inclusion because I think it's pretty rare that video games are, at least in a lot of the novels I read, unless they're specifically about video games or pop
Yeah.
culture technology, right?
Yeah.
To just play, but he played such a large role of Kai always having the Game Boy and always having Mario, and that kind of being his kind of security blanket in a way.
Their escape, and it was her escape as well.
Yeah.
Like, I like that parallel, and I also think that like having the friends that I have on a spectrum, this is a very common thing for them is to escape into video games, and it's also like a way, kind of like watching TV or watching different interactions. You kind of learn different mannerisms from it with masking, you know.
Yeah, I did want to point out. I don't think we mentioned it yet. That the author is autistic,
Mhm.
and and so reading, I was wondering how much of this is pulled from her own experiences and put into this, and so I really liked it, and it really kind of proves that like Gothic literature isn't so much about when it takes place, but the vibe, the atmosphere, right? Like you can
Oh,
have
yeah.
books set now that include video games and it be very Gothic, and as long as you bring in those paranormal themes and set those
Yeah.
atmospheric tones, like I really enjoyed that. So just wanted to make sure that was said.
Yeah.
Even like the trope of like arranged marriage and like, you know, leaving the protagonist in the dark, you know, manipulating their environment and their information and like their perception of reality. So Gothic. Like that was like, even from the description of like the bridal gown,
Yeah.
right? Like she wears the same gown to her weddings. Like, oof, that felt very dark and very morbid and very Gothic of somebody like to wear, you know, I saw it as like old Devon is dead, right? For the second wedding. Like the Devon that went into marriage was dead. And so she was wearing a dead woman's gown. Like it didn't fit her, it didn't suit her, and it was her marching into a funeral. It was just like, oof, so creepy and spooky. I like it. It felt like sci-fi Gothic. I was not mad about it.
I think that, like, for me, reading it, coming from a background where like, deeply religious women were there was a very specific type of manipulation with women that was used in the book as well, and it's the false importance of you as a creator, so to say, or a child bearer, and how that you are to base your worth on that, and how you start to believe it because that's all you've ever been told. That's all you've ever. They focus on that from the time you are a child up into that, and so you go willingly because you think that this is I'm fulfilling what I'm supposed to do. I'm very special. And that's how she feels as a child growing up, and then more specifically on her wedding day. She went very willingly, and she was like, this is what we do. This is, and
I'm a princess.
I'm a princess. I'm very special. And then that change from her first wedding to her second wedding, man, like it's kind of like I'm in several groups that are ex-Christian, and we call it deconstructing. And that was her deconstruction, was realizing that now she's seeing it for what it is, what she's been told to dream about her entire life, and how important she is. And she realizes, like, this isn't enough. I'm not fulfilled. If anything, I don't feel like myself. I feel like things are being taken from me, and then go like still going to the next one, but but realizing that maybe what she based her entire life on is a lie. And that realization is really, I feel like she portrayed that very well in Devon. It was very familiar, is what I should say.
Yeah, it brought me to
Same.
parallels of House of the Dragon, that
Hmm.
the child bed is our battlefield, right? Like
Yeah,
she tells that to her daughter.
yeah,
And we see just how disposable the queen's life is
exactly.
for the prospect of a son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it really, ultimately, it really is about their ability to give birth
Mm-hmm.
to heirs. In this case, women are the prize because they
Mm-hmm.
continue the line. And so it's different, where they don't want male heirs because they have enough men, but
Mm-hmm.
they just need wombs, they just need vessels.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, that was really interesting, and there's a lot of parallels throughout history. And I think this is where I think a review said that, you know, misogyny could be a trigger. Like, yeah, the misogynistic rhetoric is very prominent in this book, but not in a,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think in a triggering way. I think in a really, like, it's incited a lot of discussion here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I also think one of the things that I would like to point out is that, you know, the fact that she went so willingly, she knew exactly what was going to happen. I mean, she was told, okay, you have a child, you have him for a couple of years, and then you move on to your next marriage. She knew that at the very beginning. But then you see throughout the story that she slowly starts to discover that maybe she's not straight. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not straight, I'm queer. But I remember in that sheltered life where literally school, church, everything, all of our social everything was from one place, and it was religion. That the thought of me discovering that I'm not straight, like, that would never have crossed my mind as a child, and it didn't, not even into my teen years. And at first I thought, I was like, well, they don't really talk about it at all. And I was like, but wait, did you when you were younger? Because that was just not an option. No, women and men, and that's it. And for her, it was kind of a slow progression, maybe. I don't know. And then it's kind of, she doesn't really talk about it that much.
yeah,
But at least, like, in my own sheltered religious background, like, that's kind of how it is there. Like, you have this strange realization later on in life, and then you feel like maybe you don't deserve to talk about it because you're either in a straight presenting relationship, or you've never, well, if I've never been with another woman, then am I gay, kind of thing. um I don't know, tangent, but yeah.
No, that's all very valid. It's very valid. I think that, you know, the whole somewhat religious cultish stuff, and even the stuff relating to her queerness is, it's also where I normally would connect to this story, because
Mhm.
I also have a very religious background, very sheltered childhood. And so I was able to draw a lot of parallels to my life reading this book. Again, normally I like to see that kind of thing in books because I know that my experience wasn't just me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not alone type thing. But at the same time, there were parts of it that just, like, kind of made me feel anxious reading the
Yeah.
experiences, the way things are described, or like things that are said to her, and things like that, just reminded me of how I felt growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I wasn't exactly in the best mindset reading this, so I think it just kind of made me really, really uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, I still think the way that she wrote this, it was still done very well, because it
Mm-hmm.
it's
does
thoughtful.
explain,
Yeah,
yeah, it does really, it explains very well the different situations that she is in, and that people, specifically women, have been in terms of things like religion. Like, I didn't go through things as, you know, terrible as Devin went through in the book, but there's just different things that remind me of it. Like, I grew up thinking that I was just supposed to be a mother, and that the man is the head of the household. He makes the decisions. You don't argue. You know, it's whatever he wants. And I did grow up in that kind of household. And so, you know, when I got to my older teens into my 20s, that's when I kind of started like forming my own
Questioning
opinions.
everything.
I started learning other things, and I was like, oh, this wasn't right for me. We shouldn't have done this. And you know, obviously that changes my decisions and how I see things through my life. And it was nice to see that happening with Devin. And Sarah Marie, you mentioned earlier that you just wanted to know how she got from point A to point B. Like, how did she go from being this super innocent, cute girl to this hardcore, I don't know, I think they described her as butch at one point. I don't know if I was like, wait, what? Like, she apparently just like cut her hair, like
some
super
like punk
short
rock,
and like,
yeah.
but
Well,
like
it was when her brother saw her too. He was like, and Devin looking like, you know,
that's what it was.
Deviant, or like, I don't remember the words, but something like that. Yeah.
They described her as just not feminine anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, Devin going from this princess to, yeah, being this, like, they describe her as monster. You know, she's helping to bring her son to, or bring people to her son and stuff like that. Like, she is doing things that are not good, but you're wanting to see, I was wanting to see like how she got to this point where she's making these really difficult decisions and doing these things that she never would have done before. I'm not doing things like that. I'm just saying it's nice to see the progression between like a super innocent,
like, for legal
kind of
purposes,
person.
This is a joke. No murder was committed at any point. I just don't like to see have a child that eats brains.
The changes. How does somebody get from that to that?
The changes.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to read, what's his name? Amarinder Patel's book. Was that his name?
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
It sounds like that needs to be published.
I would love to read that book. That actually seemed very interesting.
That's what I want.
And that's where I was like, hey, Devin, you've got this guy who literally knows everything about book eaters now. Go learn about the things. Ask more questions so I can know the answers.
But that fictional book is what I thought this book was going to be.
Yes, me too. That's what I thought. I didn't know we were going to solely focus on Devin and her kid, which was a nice story. But I'm very like, I really like this species of creature or whatever, alien. I don't know.
Grow. She could take this in a lot of directions.
We could get a sequel called Mind Eaters.
She actually did say, I think on Goodreads, that this is a standalone book. However, she would like to revisit the universe in the future and write about someone else.
Give me Japan. Tell me about that. Because I have a lot of questions. I'm like, I could totally see that being completely different, and I would like to know more. And I would like it to focus on the society and less on like a family, because I have a lot of questions about book eaters and mind eaters. And
because I missed it, did they say at all when book eaters first started?
They didn't give a year. They didn't give a year. Just like thousands of years ago.
Yeah,
when was Papyrus first created?
One of the excerpts in front of, or at the beginning of a chapter, said something about how there's different mentions throughout history that may or may not apply to book eaters.
Yeah.
Logistically, like, are you going to eat the hieroglyphs off of, you know,
I was thinking that stones?
Too. Ask their aliens.
What did they do before paper?
Maybe they were called stone lickers before.
Oh my god.
That was like an insult. Wow. How dare you? You stone licker.
Maybe that's why cave paintings are a little smudgy.
Because the stone lickers came and smooth everything.
Maybe that's why. It has nothing to do with time and erosion. It has everything to do with stone liquor.
All right,
I mean, I'm
that's
saying
Bella's
if I had to choose between being a stone liquor and a book eater, I think stone liquor would have more flavor.
Really? You wouldn't want to taste the comics that you read?
Oh, they're too pretty. No, I'm just saying.
No,
Paints
it's
back in the day, like minerals or stuff in there.
I mean, it would have been based off like berries,
yeah,
but
but
also like dried
they're also
blood.
toxic. Some of them were
Yeah,
toxic.
Rico.
So
Idiot. No,
Oh, okay. So
that was
people
too
can
mean.
eat
Sorry.
books, but can't handle toxic.
That was a joke for anyone listening. Rico is not an idiot.
it's
I want to get
but
canceled.
you just brought
I'm
up
gonna edit you
the
out of the entire
taste.
episode.
Please,
I
please don't edit
wanted
that.
to.
I have a question. If you could eat any book, what would it be?
Oh my god!
I would eat a cookbook.
Ooh,
'Cause
that's
then
smart.
maybe I could taste.
That's
the
actually a
recipe.
good idea.
That's a really good idea.
Hmm.
I don't have an answer to this question. What you
Yeah, I
all
was gonna be.
That's
I
a
was gonna
question
say
for
I
the
don't know.
listeners. Everybody listening, which book would you eat? Please let us
Yeah,
know.
tell us in the comments. What book would you
That's
eat?
a good question. I didn't think of it.
No, while I was reading this book though, I kept having this like weird sensation of like thinking of eating paper. Like when you were a kid, like you had that weird memory of like, well,
Yes.
I kept having that throughout the entire book, and I was like, that doesn't
Yes.
sound good.
No, and like when she mentioned the like petroleum taste of like, glossy textbooks and stuff like that.
Plastic. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, I was like, oh, I can taste that. Cause I remember like if you ever had to, like when you rip something and you fold it and then you lick it to like make it more terrible. I was like, ugh, I can taste it. Or like what stamps might taste like, or envelopes, like the sticky glue. Ugh. I was like, I can see why she would eat ketchup with that.
Wait, you bring that up reminds me that part triggered me because she's eating it like a burrito and they're putting ketchup on it, and people who put ketchup on their burritos. Ugh.
That's wrong.
I don't know who you're talking about. I
So,
plead the fifth.
Uh-oh.
So that
It's
was
definitely
a
not
trigger
me.
warning for me. How dare you? I mean, I thought that was pretty funny. Put ketchup on it.
Anything
That's
with
funny.
eggs, I would put ketchup on. That's how I could eat eggs
fine.
for a really
That
long
sounds
time.
terrible.
Okay,
I
I do like
liked-
eggs.
I liked how in this book
I'm allergic to
though
them.
how they describe certain books or like the flavors that they get. And then there's
Yes.
that one time when they said that the Winterfields, they made their books and their paper look like human food.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So like they had roast meat made of sculpted paper, pages dyed in a multitude of colors and shaped into delicate fake fruit. They made a salad out of shredded pages of Midsummer Night's Dream that were dyed green.
Yes.
But it was interesting like how they described certain things. So like it said well-crafted romance novel, complex, sweet, and a little stinging. So I thought that was kind of cool, a little creative in how she would describe certain genres.
Yes. It made me start thinking about like you were imagining like what paper tasted like. I was like, I wonder what this book would taste like if I were a book eater. Like listening to like my romance novels, I was like, maybe this would taste like what rain smells like. Like maybe it would make me think of that sort of like thunderstorm in England, grassy fields, like ugh. And then I was like, I just want to be in England. It's so hot in Sacramento. It's 100 degrees. Please take me to England.
I have two thoughts. You know who would do books as food really well? Japan.
That's why I want to know about the book eaters in Japan.
And book would be so freaking cute and
it would be
beautiful.
Scented. They would be scented and flavored.
The nicest origami paper.
Yes.
And like writing on it. Like their stuff would be delicacies for sure.
The rice paper alone, like, because you can eat rice paper. That's a thing. Rice paper candy. And so like imagine books tasting like that, like delicious. Who wouldn't be a book eater?
There would be a lot of ceremony around it too.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like
ink tea ceremonies.
Yes, exactly. Sunyi, please give that to us. I need it.
I'm moving to Book Eaters Japan. And then my second thought, Sarah Marie, I have an answer for you. The book I would eat is the first deluxe edition of the Sandman comic books. which is this
It would just
giant,
taste like sand.
That really
Yeah.
big one that's like over
a really
100
big
bucks.
one. It's real thick, leather bound, super pretty, but it's
Tastes like
just
leather and sand.
full
You're
of
vegan.
story. I'm a book eater in this scenario. It doesn't matter.
What would it taste like? What do
It
you
would
Trees
taste
have
like
lives.
dreams. It would taste just like so many different stories. Those comics are all over the place. They're just beautiful stories and horror and fantasy and
Good
hope.
to know your veganism dies with your humanity, Rico.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Just wow.
And yeah, and I realized with that answer, this episode is basically sponsored by The Sandman now on Netflix. Go watch it.
The Sandman.
Yeah, it is.
I know. Seriously, I was like, do you work for the show?
Hey, I'd be fine with that.
Did you actually produce the audible of Sandman? Oh yes, I thought it was really good. The
It's
sound
so
mixing
good.
was
Oh my
excellent.
goodness. Yeah.
Everyone go
actually-
listen, rate it 5 stars.
I actually have a friend who was part of the company that helped with the color correction on this show.
Fancy.
I didn't know they had separate companies for that. That's
Yeah.
more you know, man.
Anyways,
All right, we're getting off the rails, so let's just maybe wrap it up.
so this book on Goodreads has an average rating of 3.99, so about 4, out of a little over 1,800 ratings. Again, this just came out, so there's not too
That
many
could
yet.
change, yeah.
Sarah Marie, we're doing a different rating system now.
Oh.
Would you say that this book is shit or the shit?
different? The shit.
Jason?
Yeah, I would say it's the shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bella?
It's the shit. If it was about Book Eaters Japan, it would be the shittiest.
Oh, that
The most
doesn't work
shit.
the way. No,
The most shit.
That's I don't know if that's
That's not
how
how
I
that
don't
works.
know.
I think it's the shit if it got you that interested in a
Yeah.
continuation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, even though I didn't always have the greatest time with this book, I would say it's the shit.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're all in agreement.
Wow, that might be a first.
I think this new binary system makes for a lot more consensus.
Yeah.
Well, honestly,
'Cause you have to really not like it to be like,
I
shit.
came into this deciding ahead of time that I was going to say shit because of just I just didn't always have a very good time. But oftentimes, talking through it with you guys sometimes will change my mind. So
I agree.
That's
I
what
think
happened.
you
Hey,
might
we
have
did
a more
it.
favorable view of the book now after talking about it with you guys.
We're influencers now.
Oh
Well, Rico already was. Watch Sandman on Netflix.
Sandman
All
on
episodes out
Netflix.
now.
Sandman,
yeah.
everybody
11
watch
episodes.
it
They were
like
great.
ASAP. We need more people watching it so that we can
I
get
need a
season
season 2.
2.
Oh my god.
It's
It's
worth
on my
it.
list. I'll get to it.
It's so worth it.
I've been reading a lot, okay?
Okay, well, just before we close out, I would love to know what you guys are going to read next.
I am securing the UK edition of Babel to read next and His Dark Materials because I was told to read those and I started them way back when and I'm going to get
His
back
Dark
into it since
Materials.
I've been His Dark Materials, it's a HBO show now, like Golden Compass. There's other ones too.
That's like Emma's favorite.
Yeah, I was like, I've heard it recently from somebody else. Okay, I think Emma brought it up in our pre-episode discussion last time. Yeah, just reading like crazy, reading every day. So I don't know.
I was recently recommended The Girl with Seven Names. I do not know how to pronounce the author's name, but it's about a woman who defected from North Korea, but accidentally. I don't know. But the person who recommended it to me, I like everything that she recommends, so I'm looking forward to it. And I'm gonna kind of go in blind, aside from what she told me, the whole North Korea defecting thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Jason?
Plot twist: they eat brains in it too. I don't know if that's true.
Well, I had already mentioned I'm making my way through the Sandman universe comics. I still have a few more to go on those. But then the next book I'm going to read is The Wizard's Ward. We had an author reach out to us. She just published her first novel a couple months ago. I'm probably going to butcher her last name. I'm super sorry. Her name's Jules McLeese, I think might be the last pronunciation. Macaleese. But it is an epic young adult fantasy franchise. Super cute cover. And I'm probably going to read that and do a quick little review video on that when I'm done. But I'm pretty excited to start that.
Nice. Cool. I'm probably going to read A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. It's the second novella of the Monk and Robot series that I mentioned earlier. Again, another novella, so it'll be a quick read. I'm not sure what I'll get to after that, but I'm looking forward to this one. Okay, well, this was fun.
Yeah.
Sarah Marie, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Is there any social media people can find you at, or anything you'd like to plug?
Nothing currently. The best social media for me is my Instagram, art by Sarah Marie.
All right.
We'll give her a
Well,
follow,
hopefully
guys.
we can have you on again in the future. If anybody has read this book, The Book Eaters, we would love for you to let us know what you thought. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, and we are also on TikTok now. We are at Shit We've Read. And hopefully we will catch you guys next month. We are going to be reading The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. And Sir Aaron Carter of the Bilo Network and podcast Before You Log Off is going to be joining us for that episode. So that'll be fun too. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Also, thank you, Bella and Jason, for being on another episode.
You're very welcome.
It was really a tough decision.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I made it. I will not be on the next episode because I will be getting married. So
that is right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
be gone for
so amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm ready to be done with planning.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for all of our listeners. And we will see you guys next month. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Shit We've Read is hosted by Laura Benson, Jason Rico, and Bella Romero, with music by Joshua Chilton and editing by Jason Rico.
To join the discussion on this and all other books we've read, find us at Shit We've Read on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok.
For more information about us or to request transcripts, please visit shitwe'veread.com.
This podcast is part of the Bilo Network. Visit bilonetwork.com for more great geeky podcasts.
Thanks so much for listening.